everyone. This is Asha, Saxena, founder and CEO of 𝘈𝘐, World Leaders in Data and AI. And welcome to the AI Talk Show. I truly believe that the LinkedIn community is such a great community to be able to have these conversations, dig deeper, and really talk about the real issues, real challenges, and real opportunities we have in the industry. So thank you for all of you who are dialing in, and I'm sure we'll have more as we continue, who'll join us as we continue this episode. What I love about where I am today with 𝘈𝘐 is that it brings together a group of senior leaders who are doing really real work, traditional enterprise work, but at the same time, it gives us access to incredible thinkers and practitioners, people who are in the field. They're industry leaders. They are actually the doers and creators, and it gives us a space where we can learn from each other. And what I love is that these conversations we have in 𝘈𝘐, through the AI Talk Show, I can bring these conversations to real life with all of you. So the goal would be that we have the conversation here with our guests, but also love to have you engage with us and talk about what your experiences are with the field of data, digital, and most importantly now AI that encompasses everything. That could be machine learning, deep learning, analytics, BI, or at the core, as we say, data. So 𝘈𝘐 has been a great space for me and for a lot of our leaders because it is a community of senior executives who are navigating these real challenges with data, AI, and especially the enterprise transformation. And when we talk about the transformation, my goal is especially for this series, is to create thoughtful conversation with leaders who are actually doing the work, not just talking about it. And in our conversation today, I'm really excited because I think we have a guest who has been the CDO, a leader in the industry, and talks very openly about her experiences and what she has done and accomplished in the role of Chief Data Officer. I have to say that it's not just the responsibility of CDOs to do reporting, data quality governance only, but I think the stakes are changing. In today's day and age, the CDOs are now asking about how do we drive AI strategy? How do we create measurable business value? Or how do we really create influence? I think it's all about culture. How do we change this culture? How do we educate and create this AI first or AI native organizations? So I think the playbook is not clear, but we are going to talk about that. I'm excited that Priya Reddy, who's a 𝘈𝘐 member, a senior leader in the industry, and I'm sure a lot of you know her, is going to talk about how the conversations around the role of CDO is changing. How do we show up as the data and AI leaders to create the impact on the organization? So with that, Priya, I want to welcome you. But before we dive in, I would love for you to just give a little introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And yes, you were recently the Chief Data Officer at a major bank, but tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got there, and we'll jump right into from the past to the present and the future of the role of CDO.
That's great, Asha. Thank you so much for having me. I come from an engineering background, electronics and communications engineering, but I have always been a technologist at heart, always drawn to building and solving problems. So I became an accidental database and ETL developer almost 2 decades ago, and that early hands-on experience is what pulled me into this world of data and eventually analytics and now generative AI and agentic AI. I have lived through the evolution of Ralph Kimball, Bill Inman, mainframe systems, the legacy on-prem data warehouses, all the way to cloud platforms. And last 5 years, we all seen generative AI and agentic AI as well. But over the 2 decades, predominantly in financial services and fintech, I have worked across the spectrum, from startups to the critical growth phases, and from inception of the organizations to all the way to IPO. So I have been a builder and a scaler. I love doing both. After serving as a Vice President of Enterprise Data Management and a Chief Data Officer at a high-growth fintech company, I recently started my own consulting practice with an intention to broaden my impact. I'm intentional about where I contribute my time. That's one of the reasons why I'm a proud WILDA member as well. And I also serve as adjunct faculty and executive coach at the Carnegie Mellon's Chief Data and AI Officer program, nurturing the next generation of data and AI leaders. I'm also on board of directors for a nonprofit Inspiring Girls in STEM, and as part of global editorial board for CDO magazine, helping shape the conversation around data and AI. And today the topic is so timely and very important, and I can't wait to dive deep and have the conversation with you.
And thank you, Priya. I think you spoke about not just your experience in the industry. I think it's so valuable to have that experience in the industry and go back and actually teach, give back to the community. I think teaching is such a noble profession, and especially when you've really spent time in the industry to go back to the next generation and share your knowledge. So I'm so glad that you do that and talk
Certainly.
about your experiences. So that's wonderful. So I wanted to talk about, your experience. You've been across the industry. You've seen maturity levels. You've seen different leadership styles through your career. And I want to talk about this big shift. We talked about the evolution of the CDO role. We've gone from, you spoke about the ETLs and managing data. And now when we speak about the boards and the CEOs, we often hear that CDOs are getting hired to manage the data. And that's what traditionally the role of CDO was. But now we are in this midst of AI transformation. And the question comes, CDOs have to take this role of thinking about the transformation and implementing the transformation. And I think this becomes a very different mandate from where we started the CDO role to be. So from your perspective, watching this role evolve across industries, how do you see the CDO role has fundamentally changed, especially now that we're talking about the AI first operating models? Where do you see the biggest disconnect between how the role is defined versus how it actually is executed in the real world?
Yeah, certainly, Asha. I can talk from my experience being in data and analytics for almost 2 decades. When I think about the new CDO playbook, right, I start with the mindset shifts because that's where most of this fiction lives. So like you talked about 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the CDO's job was often seen as building pipelines, cleaning data, and policing governance, making sure everyone has right access controls and everyone is doing the right thing with data. And also governance was on paper mostly, right? It was part of a committee and it was like approvals, documentation, and data quality was like a blame game when something goes wrong. I mean, we talk about it where the data is wrong, and then soon it becomes like a blame game. And it was mostly data team's job. And also the ownership was unclear in the beginning. Like when data goes wrong, who is responsible for it? Who is fixing it? And who is also making sure that it doesn't reappear? And so the data office became default owner, and also data teams ended up carrying a lot of burden on them. But what has changed in the last more so 5 years with the generative AI shift is that AI has raised the stakes. Suddenly, it is not just reporting or dashboard accuracy, or whether we are meeting SLAs or whether the data is clean or not. Now, data is a product. It is a capability, not just a pipeline anymore. And also data is, like you said, it is driving business value. It is driving customer outcomes. And also it is automating, right? So governance also not like blocker like before, not like whenever, even myself, whenever I used to think about governance, I used to think like a red tape, right? But it is not that red tape or a blocker anymore. Mostly the organizations are weaving that into the workflow or designing as part of the delivery itself. And also data quality cannot be that back office stuff, that boring stuff, and it cannot become like an argument. The governance and data quality have to become accelerators. And also ownership is much more methodical lately. We approach it as a shared accountability across the stakeholders because AI is not just data team's responsibility, it is everyone's responsibility within the organization. And in my experience, Asha, what happens when the what happens when the CDO shifts from being the gatekeeper of the data and access controls to the orchestrator. That's when the magic happens. That's when you start to seeing that business value. So being a data leader, you speak both business language and technical language, and you bring business, technology, legal, compliance, marketing, all operations teams into one room and define those decision rights and define the ownership and then make that work visible in the business terms so that everyone understands. And earlier, I'm sure you have gone through this as well, when a number, especially in the financial services, when a number, a funding amount or a disbursement amount doesn't match, we used to spend days arguing where it went wrong, whose system is right, whose system is wrong. That can eventually become like a blame game, right? But now the mindset is completely different. How do you approach that, and how do you see that number impacting a particular decision? That's when everybody will be in the game, because we are talking about decisions, we are talking about business value and outcomes. Then you align everyone into that shared accountability and design that pipeline so that we have auditability, traceability, and help the teams to see where the drift is happening so that it is not like a debate anymore. It's like a diagnosing a problem. So that is the fundamental shift I have seen and based on my experience. Hope I have answered.
So many great points, Priya, you bring up is, of course, like the biggest challenge is who owns the data. The ownership is a huge challenge. Like, the finance team is hoarding their data, and sales and marketing. And then how do you really figure out, how do you create this common ground when you don't have the authority? How do you create the influence? And I think it's such a critical piece. What you spoke about is that who do you eventually blame, right? Who should take the responsibility? So I do believe that as we, through our careers, I have personally seen that the CDOs may not have to be most technical, but they need to know how to translate between the business and technology to be really able to understand how to connect this landscape of data and a new resource, a very powerful resource like AI, and really focusing on business outcome, because people are talking about AI, but the business is looking at the results. They're saying, well, we hear that AI can, do so much work and there's so much efficiency created. Why are we taking so long? Something, it's been published over and over. Programmers who were coding for 3 months can do the same work in 3 days. So now expectations have increased a lot from business. So how do you really, right? You were going to say something?
No, that is true, Asha.
Yeah. And so how do you influence the peers, right? Because now the expectation is so much from this technology like AI, and the business is looking at the data leaders and saying, okay, do the magic. You've got the data, you've got the people, resources, you've got the technology. You should be doing the work in a lot less time just because you have this technology. So I think the CDO has this additional pressure of the business outcomes and influencing and making sure that without the authority, they can actually bring along the legal, risk, IT, business along with them, right? So I think this whole leadership capability, which is really critical Um, and as you develop, these capabilities and the background, but these CDOs are really coming from the technical background. This is something that they probably didn't really have to focus on in the leadership journey. So, what have you seen in your own journey that you had to develop to make sure that you show up as a true CDO for today?
That's a great question, Asha, and also very thoughtful. Like you mentioned, those new capabilities are what defining the new CDO's playbook. From
Right.
my experience, I will share a few things in a very practical way. Even like I mentioned, I come from a very technical background, but once I started seeing the power of data, how it can transform businesses, I was more towards learning more about business, right? Because I want to learn business so that I can take this technology and see how can I help the business with this technology. I mean, if not, technology is technology. There is no use of it, right? If you don't use to solve a right problem. And earlier on in my career, very humble beginnings, I became a big fan of learning business. I quickly got onto the business teams, interviewed business teams to understand what do they do on day-to-day work, so that when I come back to my team, I know what problem they are facing so that I can take the right technology and help them. That's how my humble beginning started. But today, after serving as Chief Data Officer, now I talk to organizations, their leaders, and the big problems are bigger, and they're getting bigger and bigger with these smart tools. So there are few capabilities that I feel that are very critical, or executive clarity. And like you talked rightly about translation and influence, and also the cross-functional orchestration and that adoption leadership. They're all very critical for the CDO in today's world. When it comes to clarity, most organizations, they do not lack AI use cases, right? They have the list goes on and on and on. What they lack is clarity. So what I see a Chief Data Officer can do is the Chief Data Officer can step in and help leaders to choose and prioritize the right use cases. Basically aligning those use cases with business outcomes. Ask right questions such as, what are the top line decisions we are trying to improve? What are the outcomes that we need to improve? What outcomes really matter to our organization? And what will we stop doing and we can execute? Because in today's world, it's not about quantity, right? It's about quality. It's not about how many projects we are pushing on our teams. It's about how methodically we are approaching our strategy so that our teams are focused on the work they are doing and they can deliver the quality product. And when it comes to translation and influence, like I mentioned, we being data leaders, we stand between business and technology. So we get to speak both languages, which is fortunate, and we move between them without losing the road. We are aligning, like you talked about, CFO's level of outcomes. COO cares about operations, right? Operational metrics, and CIO is the main person to deliver those business values. And we talk about all those in one storyline as a Chief Data Officer, and which is very important in these days. And next comes the cross-functional collaboration, because AI touches every element in the organization today, whether we know it or not. And it touches from frontline operations to risk, sales, credit, legal, compliance, cyber, IT, every business team, right? But your data and AI strategy only becomes real when we bring those leaders, all those stakeholders, early in the game. When we bring them early in the game and create that shared accountability, that's when they feel that they are part of the game. We have to say that we are in this together, we are building this together. Not like, data team is pushing another initiative, right? Because everyone has their plate full of things to work on. Last but not least, the adoption leadership. That is where the biggest struggle for many organizations. The larger organizations, large tech firms, they are able to make a headway through generative AI and agentic AI. However, mid-sized organizations and smaller organizations are still struggling because they underestimated the power of adoption. Because their models won't create the impact, right? We have to change the behavior around people, around how we operate, so that we bring that adoption. We have to embed AI into those workflows and provide, like as a chief data officer, it is our responsibility to provide training. For a simple example, when we have Microsoft Copilot at Office, how many are really using Copilot, right?
Yeah.
Not so many, because many are to use it. We can start with leaders, and it doesn't have to be a mandatory, but make it in a way that leaders use it for themselves and see the value. Then they can ask their teams to do it. When they use it for themselves and see the value, that's when the motivation kicks in, and then they can start incorporating those AI tools into their workflows. So that's when the adoption increases as well. That's what I have seen in my experience. One small example I want to give. Years ago, being in data, doing reporting, dashboards, I'm pretty sure you might have used the same as well, Asha. I used to start my day with the coffee and checking a report, right? It was mostly like, how are we looking on SLAs? Are they green? Are they red? Or how are the pipelines doing? Are they stable? Are they running late? And whether the numbers are flowing right? That used to be our typical day, but today we look at better things, ask better questions, like how are these numbers impacting our outcomes? And who owns those definitions and who owns those decisions? So the shift is basically, like I talked about, it's the mindset shift, and from that is the shift from reporting and dashboard to operating model itself.
Mm-hmm. I think there's so many nuggets which I think you have to hold on to, and our listeners should really hold on to and make sure that they can implement, because you spoke about learning the business language. I thought that was so critical, that when you think about your stakeholders, if you don't understand your stakeholders really well, you can be really good technically, but you'll never be able to get the adoption. You'll never get the buy-in. You'll never get the resources you need. So I think I love that you said that really investing in learning your business language, business stakeholders, and understand what their true need is. I think there's a lot of learning and growth that is required when you're a data engineer or data professional, to becoming a leader at a C-suite, and be really understanding the organization and their need. But when you think about, and we spoke about balance and quality and trust, it's really important. But I want to go back to the governance topic, because I think we talk about governance and everybody start talking about the red tape and is it going to slow us down? And now everybody wants this AI and the magic of AI happening. But how do we really create the speed and innovation when we are questioning the trust and governance? So I want to talk a little bit about the balance act. We want to move fast with AI, but at the same time, we are worried about, time, trust, transparency, responsible AI. All these things are non-negotiable. But, as a CDO, you're thinking about the speed and innovation with governance and trust, especially when you're scaling AI for the enterprise. So it's not an easy task for CDOs, but have you used any practical frameworks or maybe a mind shift you think that has really worked for these CDOs and the organizations?
Absolutely, Asha. You have such great questions today. I'm loving all of them. So you rightly said about the balancing act, right? So you cannot miss either of them. You cannot miss speed or innovation in this fast-moving AI first world. So in my view, it comes down to integrating both speed and innovation with the right guardrails, right? I see a lot of organizations trying to sprint to generative AI use cases because their business is excited or their board asked them to do, and they should be. I'm not denying that they shouldn't, but how are they approaching that, right? So I'll tell you an example. I have started working with a client recently where they already have a few models and a few generative AI use cases or initiatives in motion, and yet they don't have a strong data foundation. The data is fragmented and it is siloed in their individual teams, and there is no clear data team or operating model. The numbers don't match when it comes to cross-functional teams, and that's when leadership loses confidence in using that data. So in such cases, my approach is little different, because if we go too fast, then that can actually slow us down, because every pilot turns into something we have to rework, right? Because there are so many data quality issues and the foundation is shaky. In that way, I have a very practical approach that I am using, right? Start with one or two initiatives that really create business value, which are aligned with our corporate strategy or business strategy, right? And that has clear ownership as well. So then create some lightweight guardrails around the data, and also don't boil the ocean when it comes to preparing the data that is needed for AI use cases, but focus on agreeing on definitions, agreeing on outcomes. What are the metrics we should be looking at? And also clear access controls. Those are non-negotiables, right? And also document enough to keep moving forward. And when it comes to foundation, right? Build a data set that is needed to support those AI models in parallel, so without boiling the ocean, like I mentioned, and focus on stabilizing that critical data so that the use cases are going to yield the right business value, because it is supported by the accurate and trusted data. And in my view, you talked about responsible AI, right? Responsible AI is nothing but repeatability with the trust. If every team in the organization have their own approach, they are creating models and they are working on their use cases, then we won't see that scale, because there is no certain pattern that you can rely on. So I would think, as data leaders, we need to create some consistency. We need to create a simple pattern that can be used across the teams when they are developing AI initiatives, so that you can also increase the speed and also trust. When we have trust, automatically the scalability happens. One more thing I have learned is when those AI use cases or initiatives are very close to customer impact or customer outcomes, that's when we have to pay a lot more clarity. That's when we have to bring a lot more clarity into the data systems and around the process itself. Because if an AI output impacts customer experience in financial services world, a lending decision, or in a healthcare world, if it's impacting a treatment plan, then or any operational action, then you need to know who owns that outcome, so that you have the auditability and traceability. And also you talked about human in the loop, right? So that who is responsible when something goes wrong around it. So that keeps innovation from becoming noise. And you rightly talked about governance. Governance, that has become the foundational layer for building these AI models. It cannot be a red tape. It cannot be a blocker, because when governance is baked into the systems, into the workflow, then it starts creating the trust on the data, right? So that's when I see that scalability.
Right. I have to say that many people who are watching today are either working through these challenges, and dealing with this, and they are in this current role of CDOs. But we also have audience here who are probably aspiring to this role. They're navigating this difficult charters or mandates, right? That the expectations and technology changes, everything is happening all at once. So when you really think about this role, I think the challenge is, how do you not only get the role but be successful in that role? So what would, in your experience, be your advice for CDOs who want to lead with confidence and create lasting impact, especially with the AI-driven world? We are working with these expectations of building the AI first organization or AI native organizations. And if you were designing a new CDO playbook, what would you absolutely have in it?
Absolutely, Asha. I love this question again because it is very special, because we are creating or nurturing the next generation of data and AI leaders. And also because next few years will reward a different kind of CDO, right? I was recently presenting at my daughter's school on career day about what I do with data and AI and why I chose my career. And there were a lot of curious questions from second graders. There was one student, he was talking about how he was trying to upload an image into a AI tool, and I told him that he cannot upload it until 30 days, but he was able to trick that system and upload it, right? Because kids are so curious, they are learning, they are even trying to trick the AI tools. So as a leader, as a data and analytics leader, we have the responsibility to create the systems that are trustworthy, because the systems we build and the decisions we make today shape the world our children will grow up in tomorrow. So my advice, it comes from that perspective and that grounded leadership. And I believe that we need to lead with curiosity, outcomes, and people first mindset. When it comes to curiosity, right? I mean, it doesn't matter whether you are early in your career, whether you are in data, AI field, any field, or you are aspiring to be a C-level executive, right? Curiosity is one of your best friend. If you can make that a best friend, we can go places. Because AI is moving too fast for any one person to know everything, right? The strongest leaders are not the ones who have all the answers, right? They are the ones who knows what questions to ask, what right questions to ask, and create an environment where learning is normal. When you are embodying that leadership, that you are still learning, you are curious, your teams sees you and follow that path and say, if Priya is still curious and she's still learning, I can learn too. And I know, Asha, you have been doing PhD, and you're like one of the leaders that I always see that continuous learning. And you also openly talk about learning, make that learning as your habit, right?
Yes.
That is something I would like to advise every data AI professional to do.
I love that, because that's so true. Learning is so critical. I couldn't agree more with you.
Absolutely, Asha. And the second thing I would advise is making AI everyone's responsibility, right? Because every part of the organization is using AI, and it shouldn't be only data teams or AI teams or technology teams' responsibility. This is where we talk about data literacy, data fluency, or AI fluency, digital fluency, right? But we do not need every leader to become a data scientist. We don't need them to code or build a model, but we need them to be fluent enough to understand the trade-offs, to understand how to use those tools, and when they use it, how to ask the right questions, and also how to validate the outputs, right? That is very important. and also make decisions with confidence. That confidence comes when they see the consistent outcomes and the AI tools are supported by accurate and trusted data. And the third one, I talked about people and customer first, right? It is very easy to build impressive decks, impressive AI demos, and POCs, but the leaders who create lasting impact are the ones who consistently tie AI back to the business outcome or customer experience. Because if that AI is not impacting your customer experience better or creating business value, then the adoption stalls. So there won't be adoption. And also show how that improves, show how that changes operationally, and also show how that risk can be reduced, right? And also it has to be measurable. We can say
Yes.
it is going to change operationally, it is going to reduce the risk, but how much risk? That is also important, right? So those are some of the key things that I have seen that has helped me to become a better leader. And I would suggest anyone going down the path of becoming a leader and also creating a bigger impact being a data and AI professional. If I have to put everything into just one line, I would say CDO is not here to manage data anymore. CDOs are here to build decision confidence at scale.
I love that. Listen, Priya, I can continue talking to you for hours and hours, but I know that we have to come to an end. So thank you so much for being here. So much wisdom. And I think the audience who's listening would take home that the modern CDO no longer, as you said, is the steward of data. You have to become the translator, the enterprise leader who is showing up with confidence, understand business, is a lifelong learner. I love what you said, is a curious, you have to be curious about what the people want. It could be people, could be your employees, your stakeholders, your customers. How are you investing in learning about what the business outcomes need to be? And of course, the organization that succeed in being the AI first world, they empower their CDOs to connect with strategy, execution. It's important that you bring them to those rooms where strategy, execution, governance is being discussed. So it's not siloed. It's not sitting in a corner trying to build that AI first world. And to everyone, I think this time you take out from your busy day to really listen and learn is a value add. So thank you for being a part of Wilder Conversations. Feel free to connect anytime if you want to learn anything about what we do at World Leaders in Data and AI. Feel free to join our website, join the next conversation, send us a note. Priya, again, thank you so much for being here and for your insightful conversation. And thank you everyone who joined. I look forward to seeing you in the next AI talk show. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Asha, on this important topic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.